People say that once someone dies, they cannot come back to life. However, this person had been gone for 3 days and then suddenly woke up from the coffin. How is this possible? This happened when I was 17 years old. My parents both worked at a fertilizer factory, and we lived in the factory dormitory building. It was a day in September 2009, and we were having dinner at home. Someone knocked on the door, and my dad got up to answer it. It was Uncle Sam, a colleague from my dad's factory. Uncle Sam was sweating heavily, as if he had rushed over. He said that Peter from the factory had died. Peter was a good friend of my dad. Hearing about Peter's death shocked my dad because Peter was not yet 50 years old, and he was always in good health. How could he just pass away like that? Due to the good relationship between my dad and Peter, my dad, along with my mom, rushed to the factory the next morning to help with the funeral arrangements. With no one at home to cook, I went along to avoid going hungry. From the conversations between my mom and Aunt Sally, I learned that Peter had died suddenly of a heart attack. Aunt Sally mentioned that Peter didn't have a history of heart problems. I stood in the crowd, not knowing what to say. When I saw Peter's body in the hotel by the wall, I walked over. Before that, I had never seen a dead person up close. It felt strange. The person who used to be there, visible every day, now lay silently, no longer part of our world. As I was lost in my thoughts, someone interrupted me. His name was Dragon, and he asked me to help with serving guests and managing condolences because there were many people to attend to. I got busy with various tasks, and 2 days passed. On the 3rd day, it was time for Peter's burial. During lunch, someone bumped into Thompson, causing him to spill his drink. Thompson was annoyed and said a few words to the person, criticizing him for not being careful. The person who bumped into Thompson was Sky, and he looked agitated, blurting out strange words. Peter was alive. The guests, confused by his words, stood up and looked in the direction he pointed. To everyone's surprise, Peter, who had been lying in the hotel, sat up. People were shocked and started murmuring. Was Peter really alive? Was he pretending to be dead? But no one dared to approach him. Peter sat there for a while, then slowly climbed out of the hotel, swaying as he walked towards the crowd. He looked at everyone and even asked why they were gathered. Despite his pale face, he didn't seem like a dead person. One brave person approached and asked if he was a human or a ghost. Peter, equally surprised, questioned when he had died and why there was a funeral for him. Seeing that Peter had truly come back to life, the crowd gathered around, questioning him about the miraculous event. Peter appeared weak, and Dragon helped him into the house, offering him water. Curious, I asked him about his extraordinary experience. Peter thought for a moment and began to tell the story. He said that on that night, he was sleeping when he heard someone calling his name repeatedly. It was a strange voice, and it woke him up. He got out of bed and saw 2 strangely dressed individuals standing by his bedside. One was dressed in black, and the other in white, both wearing tall hats. The person in white held a long iron chain and swung it, looping it around Peter's neck. He wrapped the chain around Peter's neck and, without listening to Peter's words, dragged him away. No matter how Peter struggled, he couldn't break free. The 2 people dragged him along a dirt-covered path, and after what felt like a long time, they arrived in front of a gloomy hall. The 2 individuals dragged him inside, and as Peter looked up, he saw a table in the hall. Behind the table sat a figure resembling the King of Hell from novels and illustrations, stern and imposing. The King of Hell yelled at Peter, asking if he was Peter, but Peter replied that he was indeed Peter. It was clear there was a mistake. Peter gathered his courage and explained to the King of Hell. The King of Hell quickly flipped through the book in front of him and, in the next moment, slammed the table in anger, scolding the black and white impermanents for their incompetence. After the reprimand, the King of Hell instructed the 2 to send Peter back. They led Peter out of the Hall of Judgment, reached a bottomless cliff, and without saying a word, pushed Peter off. Peter, caught off guard, screamed and disappeared at the bottom of the cliff. When he woke up, he found himself lying in a coffin. The two individuals had taken him away and brought him back, and he felt it had only been a few hours. To his surprise, 3 days had passed. Peter recounted his experience, and everyone was amazed. Some believed him, while others doubted. However, Peter's storytelling stirred up one person who had come to help, his cousin's wife. She was furious because the Peter he spoke of was her husband, Peter's cousin. Seeing her angry, Peter tried to explain, but she wouldn't listen and stormed off. Peter's resurrection turned the funeral into a celebration, but the story didn't end there. His cousin's wife went home and told the whole story to her husband, Peter. The couple was infuriated. The next morning, Peter didn't wake up for work at the usual time. His wife called him, but there was no response. Suddenly, she remembered the story Peter had told. Worried, she rushed to check on him and, upon seeing him, screamed in horror. Peter had been dead for quite some time, and a post-mortem examination revealed a heart attack as the cause, even though Peter had no history of heart problems. This incident became widely known in our area, but whether it was a case of a soul returning or a genuine resurrection remained unverified. However, the fact that Peter came back to life was undeniable.